performed by Daksha, text 47. Yeah? Sa prasidatam aksha amaksham akankshatam darshanam te pabrashta satkarmanam kityamane nibinamni yajneshate yajna vignakshayam yanti tamai namaha. Sa prasidatvam amaksham akankshatam sa prasidatvam asmakam akankshatam darshanam te pratibrashta satkarmanam krityamane nibirnamni yajneshate yajna vignakshayam yanti tasmai namaha. Sa prasidatvam asmakam akankshatam paribrashta satkarmanam kirtyamane nibirnamni yajneshate yajna vignakshayam yanti tasmai namaha. Prasidatam sakshmakam akankshatam darshanam te paribrashta satkarmanam kirtyamane nivirnamni yajneshate yajna vignakshayam yanti tasmai namaha. Please repeat word by word. Saha, that same person. Prasida, be pleased. Tvam, you. Asmakam, upon us. Akankshatam, awaiting. Darshanam, audience. Te, your. Paribrashta, fallen down. Satkarmanam, of whom the performance of sacrifice. Krityamane, be enchanted. Nribihi, by persons. Namni, your holy name. Yajna Isha, O Lord of sacrifice. Te, your. Yajna Vignaha, obstacles. Kshayam, destruction. Yanti, attain. Tasmai, unto you. Namaha, respectful obeisances. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Śrīla Prabhupada Ki Jai. Dear Lord, we were awaiting your audience because we have been unable to perform the yajnas according to the Vedic rituals. We pray unto you, therefore, to be pleased with us. Simply by chanting your holy name, one can surpass all obstacles. We offer our respectful obeisances unto you in your presence. Purport. The Brahmana priests were very hopeful that their sacrifice would be carried out without obstacle now that Lord Vishnu was present. It is significant in the verse that the Brahmanas say, simply by chanting your name we can surpass all the obstacles, but now you are personally present. The performance of yajna by Daksha was obstructed by the disciples and followers of Lord Shiva. The Brahmanas indirectly criticized the followers of Lord Shiva, but because the Brahmanas were always protected by Lord Vishnu, Shiva's followers could not do any harm to their prosecution of the sacrificial process. There is a saying that when Krishna protects someone, no one can harm him, and when Krishna wants to kill someone, no one can protect him. The vivid example was Ravana. Ravana was a great devotee of Lord Shiva, but when Lord Ramachandra wanted to kill him, Lord Shiva could not protect him. If some demigod, even Lord Shiva or Lord Brahma, want to harm the devotee, Krishna protects the devotee. But when Krishna wants to kill someone, such as Ravana or Hiranyakashipu, no demigod can protect him. Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Litam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swaparantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Namo Prabhupada Priyarasaya Jagannatha Yatrananda Murtaye Bhakta Sukaya Krishna Kirtanena Narsinghe Narakshataaya Namaha Namo Vishnu Paraya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashchatyade Shatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Garadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So read once the verse again. Sa prasida tvam asmakam akankshatam darshanam te paribrashta satkarmanam krityamani nirbirnam niyagneshate yagnya vigna kshayam yanti tasmai namaha. Dear Lord, we are awaiting your audience because we have been unable to perform the yagyas according to the Vedic rituals. We pray unto you, therefore, to be pleased with us. Simply by chanting your holy name, one can surpass all obstacles. We offer our respectful obeisances unto you in your presence. Hare Krishna. How is Hariveno feeling? Okay. Because I'm only sitting, it's like a chain reaction. Akila is cooking for Hariveno and I'm giving class for Akila. So we'll continue hearing from the Bhagavatam, and there's a few sections in the Bhagavatam where after the culmination of a ceremony, all the assembled personalities have a chance to offer prayers, and here also now the Brahmanas are speaking already for the third verse in sequence. And in this verse, Srila Prabhupada is focusing on two main things. That the Brahmanas indirectly were criticizing the followers of Lord Shiva. So, because in the previous chapters we heard how Daksha made a mistake. He disrespected her own daughter, didn't show any respect or affection, and she was so disgusted by his behavior that she decided to self-immolate. So sati, and the topic of sati is especially in, you could say, more or less modern times and recent times, it was exploited to discredit India very much. So sati is like such a backward culture. They were forcing all the women to jump into fire. But of course, the origin is very important to understand. And Sati is the name of Parvati in her previous birth. So Sati, as the daughter of Daksha, was married to Lord Shiva. But because of the misbehavior of her father, she said, I don't want to have this body. This body is part of you, and I don't want it. Because the way you are behaving, the way you're disrespecting my husband, the way you're not acknowledging my connection with my husband, or you are disregarding me because of your disregard for my husband, I don't want this body. So she self-immolated. Through a process of yoga, she managed to collect all the energy. And the Sushumna Nadi is this main energy channel we have in the body, and basically corresponds to the central nervous system. So the central nervous system has two parts, the spinal cord and the brain. And of course, this is the, you could say, key energetic center of the body. Everything is controlled through or from these two centers. From the brain, we have many nerves controlling all our facial features, all our sensory perception in the face. And from the spinal cord, the nerves are arising and controlling our limbs. And also, of course, internal digestion, etc. So from the spinal cord, everything is controlled in the body, and from the brain, everything is controlled, especially in the face. And this, you could say, physical representation is considered to be the Sushumna Nadi. So this energy channel going from top to bottom, and along this energy channel we have the 7 chakras, beginning at the bottom, racing upwards. So Sati, it is explained from her association with Shiva, who is considered to be the Adi Yogi. And also, Srila Prabhupada says, because she's from a royal family, she was well educated. And she was expert at yoga. So she sat down and she controlled her energy at the base and raised it through all the 7 chakras, through the Sushumna Nadi, assembled it here at the Agnya chakra, and then self-immolated herself. Very spectacular. Very cool, very controlled, very conscious. It was a conscious exit. And it was in one sense like a form of protest or rebellion, against her unfair the treatment she was given, unfair treatment she was given. And we also hear about an occurrence of Sati, of course, in the Mahabharata, where Maharaj Pandu, Maharaj Pandu dies prematurely, and then both the wives, Kunti and Madri, actually want to join him in the fire. So these occurrences are absolutely voluntary. So these ladies, they could not imagine living without their husbands. So for them it would be better, or more tolerable to go together with the husband. And this is actually very often you can see in couples that they're very, very connected and have been living, many years together, especially in old age. When one of them passes away, it only takes sometimes a few hours, a few weeks, a few days, and then the partner also passes away. So they are, following. So in a similar way, this act of sati was a completely voluntary occurrence, and it was also not very common. Actually, this is also a common misbelief that every woman did it. It's like, no, because not everybody has such a deep bond. You need to have a very deep bond that for you, jumping in fire is more tolerable than remaining alone. And the reason why it's explained is because the fire of separation can be very, very tough. When you really like somebody, really love somebody, being separated, this fire of separation burns so hard that you would prefer to jump in fire. Then the real fire feels like, a relief, from this burning sensation of separation. Because, and I'm mentioning this because if you, in nowadays in India, a big section of society is, has been brainwashed by Western Indology, and in the West also many Indologists, and they have a very distorted perception of India. Basically, you could say it in simple sentences. The narrative would be, Indians were savages, and they were burning their wives, whenever the man died prematurely. And the English came and saved them from this savagery. That's that's basically the representation they're given. But in reality, the cases of sati, they are described in the Shastras, and they are glorified because it was a completely voluntary act. And the origin is, of course, sati herself, that she herself had nothing to do with the death of her husband directly. It was just he was dishonored, and she preferred to just go. And in the other cases, like basically taking a lead from sati, some sati performances were there, and whenever they happened, they were usually mentioned in the text in the Shastras, and there were very few occurrences in history actually. And it might have happened because, of course, there's Kali Yuga, that some, completely, you could say, egoistical person or families, they're like, you have to show that you loved our son, You must show that you loved our son, You must show by the test of fire that you actually, are a really chaste wife, So jump in the fire, It did happen, but it was very, very, very rare. If you compare it with the West, the times witches were burned was much more often, I think 1868, was the last time a witch was burned somewhere nearby here, not too long ago, She's a witch, and they burned her, So it's important to have, because people are, especially Indians who are not. Sometimes, when you have been colonized, you have this inferiority complex. So Indians have this inferiority complex. I come from Peru. We were born in Peru, and also the Spanish colonized Peru. And naturally, there is this inferiority complex, because you were beaten down, and then there is this so-called Stockholm syndrome. You might have heard. So when somebody is, very powerful in doing you harm, at one point you start admiring this person because they're very powerful. They're controlling your life. You start liking your kidnapper. It's very common. So in mass, when there's colonization or conquering, that also happens. So Indians have very low self-esteem, and as soon as you mention anything like that, and of course, at least you could say 3 to 4 generations, in India suffered like extreme negligence in education. So the vast majority of Indian population did not enjoy some form of proper traditional education. Some very few aristocratic families, they still conserve that, but the majority, they were raised in a semi-socialist system, and until recently it was forbidden to teach yoga or teach shastras in schools in India because it's secular. You want to separate state and religion. They took it very seriously. So many Indians can very easily be intimidated, when they tell you sati, and caste system, and they're already like crawling in their hole, like, we're so bad, we thank God the British came and saved us, But it's changing fast. Many Indians have, through the information age, a lot of information is available and spreading much faster. Also, good messages. And yes, so Sati, as the wife of Lord Shiva, then of course was reborn as Parvati, the daughter of Parvat, the king of the Himalayas, Parvati, and then she was reunited with Lord Shiva. So there's a few points there I want to mention shortly. It's of course, first of all, is that in general, when you have a bigger perspective of the existence of the soul, then death is not as tragic as it seems when you are ignorant about the nature of the soul. If we are ignorant of the nature of the soul, then the value of the body increases manifold. And because the value of the body increases manifold, whatever happens to the body is also equally much more tragic, and devastating. And Satchidananda Maharaj always tells, or a few times told this story about, I think it was in Varsha now, where he regularly goes, near Govardhan, also to spend his time in Kartik. And because he's a regular there, he knows the kids, he sees them, growing up, And there was one kid especially that he somehow had a connection with. And one year he returned to Varshana, and that kid had one arm missing. One arm missing. So they were cutting grass or fodder for the cows. These big wheels, just like big wheels with these two knives, and somehow the kid, put his arm gone. So Maharaj was shocked, because he liked this kid so much. So he's like, what happened to you? And the kid was like smiling. Radha takes, Radha gives. Krishna takes, Krishna gives. And Maharaj was like, wow, that's it, He has no psychological damage. He's not, depressed or, And then he realized, there's a big difference, because in the West, it's not whenever, like if something like that happens to a child, generally it's recommended for the child to go to the psychologist, to process, because now he's inhibited, handicapped, and that probably is more traumatic, than the actual, it's like he's ashamed, he's not telling his friends, he actually has to go to psychology regularly, and he feels so bad about himself, and because it's all about the body, So when you have a bigger perspective and are connected with the eternal nature of the soul, then of course it's a disadvantage, but it's nothing that will throw you back that much, But for many other people, losing a limb or of course death ultimately is such a traumatic loss, Any bodily loss is so traumatic that many people don't recover, Many people don't recover when a very dear person passes away, They just can't process it, This was such an amazing person, such a strong relationship, and suddenly this person is gone, missing, Whereas if you have the understanding that the nature is eternal, that soul is eternal, then you can miss the person, but you still know that the person is somewhere. It's very different. I remember when I moved to Brazil, then we have a very good friend, Radhakund, was my best friend. We're still best friends. It says best friends, you can be apart for 10 years, then you meet again, and you just continue straight there where you stopped. And I have one such friend, fortunately, in this life, Radhakund. He's in New York now. And when I moved to Brazil, we were like, because it was very more or less spontaneous decision, my parents my mother took. So we moved to Brazil to the No Jarikanda farm of Samaka Maharaj. And it was hard because we were really missing each other, but we knew we were there, So after a few years we were united again. So in a similar way, if somebody who's close and dear, Singade Bhagwan Ki Jai. If somebody who's close and dear passes away, you will naturally miss the person, and it's not unnatural to cry and to feel separation, but you're not in ignorance. It's a different form of, let's say for example, if somebody goes missing and the body is never found, that's much worse for the family members because they're in ignorance. There's uncertainty. They don't know. Might be alive, might be dead, maybe still being tortured. Who knows? Horrible. If you know the person is dead, it's like, okay, then I can close somehow. So in a similar way, if you are in ignorance what happens after death, it's tough. It's confusing. Whereas if you have knowledge of the soul, then there might still be pain, but it's conscious. You just miss the person, and also according to how they lived, you can picture or make out where they are now. Maybe if it's your parent, maybe you gave them prasadam. So, they had prasadam, they will be fine, Akila has many quotes because Akila is already rolling sweets, energy balls, best recipe. And he goes to Swiss and distributes prasadam. And he has so many quotes about the benefits of giving somebody prasadam, an animal or a human. Generally, anybody who takes prasadam once was already granted to be born again as a human. And if you want more quotes, probably Akila has all of them in his phone. And then you can, it's much more easy to understand, what the destination of the soul will be. Or you for sure know that this person is not annihilated or gone. The energy has to go somewhere. So, and the criticism of the Brahmanas here towards the followers of Lord Shiva was that, after that occurred, after Sati, self-immolated, the followers of Shiva, rushed back towards Shiva, and Shiva drew a hair from his head, smashed it to the ground, and from that huge, powerful creature, appeared. Virabhadra, Virabhadra, I forgot how many arms, with all these weapons and red copper hair and huge, this is like covering the sun and sky, And he came, revenge, and they demolished the whole, the whole yagya, and in very obscene ways also, they started urinating and desecrating, everything they could, It was full mayhem. And the Brahmanas, of course, regularly have to experience that. Also, we know from Hiranyakashipu there is this chapter in the 7th canto which says Hiranyakashipu was terrorizing the universe. So you could say he was the first terrorist. He started terrorizing the Brahmanas, and inhibiting them from performing their sacrifices, and trying to, put all the rules of the Vedas, on its head, upside down. Ravana also, who's mentioned here, he was trying to make a shortcut to heaven. Usually you achieve the Svarga, the heavenly planets, by pious activities. Charity and generosity, and planting trees and giving education, drilling wells, doing selfless deeds or performing yajna in general. And he said, no, we will build a stairway to heaven. I think one famous band, who was it? Led Zeppelin, I think. One famous band made this, stairways to heaven. That was Ravana. Savana would try to build, we don't need to do any pious activities. We just build a stairway to heaven, to the Svargas. And, of course, Indra did before already, Indra sat down on the throne of Indra, and it says when he moved his eyebrow, all the demigods were like, what should we do? So, but the point that is ultimately made here by Srila Prabhupada is that even the Brahmanas were inhibited, ultimately they are protected. At the end there is protection. Like in the Ramayana, of course, Ram came, and there's a famous story. What is it called? The demoness? Takshaka, no? Takshaka? Huh? Taraka. Taraka, yeah. Taraka. She was a Rakshashi, and she was, the whole forest had become inauspicious because of her presence, and I always mix them. Vashishta. Vashishta, Vishwamitra? Vishwamitra, yeah. Vashishta and Vishwamitra. I always mix them up. He took Ram and Lakshman into the forest, to protect them, and they, killed the Rakshasa, and then again they could perform, sacrifices. So again and again, we will see how there might be attempts, to hinder the performance of sacrifices, the worship of Vishnu, but ultimately the Brahmanas will be protected. Of course, in this situation, you could say there is many different perspectives or lessons, because in one sense, when you read the Bhagavatam, you will maybe feel, like you might feel like it was a, you could say, you might be rooting for the followers of Shiva, It's like, they deserve this, followers of Daksha, so arrogant, but I think in general it's like, because it's Vaishnava Parada is always two-sided, and when Shiva was the only one not really involved, but everybody else, the followers of Shiva and the followers of Daksha and Daksha himself, they all committed many grave mistakes. Shiva was the only one who, like, when this cursing and counter cursing started taking place, Shiva just stood up and left. He wouldn't take part, but they really went into it. Nandishvara especially, and Brigu, they were cursing and counter cursing each other. And many of these curses still have a consequence until today, Like one of the curses the followers of Shiva received from, I think, Brigu was that, or Brihaspati, was that if you worship Lord Shiva only, you will become a Satanist, You will become basically dragged into deepest ignorance, And that is visible, Like sometimes you have, especially if you've been around a little bit in this, I don't know, like yoga scene or rainbow gatherings and, Goa rave parties, they all like Shiva, and they're very confused. They're imitating Shiva, similar like the Babas in India. They also, we were once in Dev Prayag. That's where the Ganges begins, where Alaknanda and Bhagirathi Ganga merge, and then officially the Ganga begins. And very ancient, beautiful town. And because it's perched between, two valleys, it hasn't changed in centuries. It's basically the same. The temple is there of Ram on the top, and the village. And we tried to find a hotel, but there was no hotel in Dev Prayag. So the only hotel was like cross the road up in the mountain. You could see the small. I said, yeah, that's the hotel. Like you're not gonna go all the way there. And so we decided to just sleep in the Ghat. Right next to the river, there were just caves. So we just rolled our. This was my mother and Gokula and Gormohan, and we rolled our mats and we just sleeping there. And then one of the next, not huts, like caves, was this Shiva Baba, red turban, super cool, He would be perfect, everybody would love him if he would appear in any Goa party, and he was smoking chillum, and coughing all night, And I was like, oh my God, this guy, is so annoying and so addicted, Really, really heavy. And then in the morning, like at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock maybe, all the bells of Dev Prayag start ringing. Dang, 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 dang. And out of all of the houses, they come with plates, with ghee lamps, and they all walk down to the river, and offer arati. Very amazing, very auspicious, But it was this like a contrast, This Baba, he was austere, but he was at the same time like very confused, completely in ignorance, like one chillum after the other. As soon as he stopped coughing, he would make his next chillum, and smoke again, like that. So this curses that, of course our curses, in general, we always learn from our parents. We shouldn't curse, because it's maybe impolite or not nice, But actually, the reason why we shouldn't curse is because if you have tejas, if you have shakti, if you curse somebody, it might actually happen, You have to be careful. Of course, in Kali Yuga, mostly we curse and nothing happens. It's like just ignore him. But in previous times, if you curse somebody, that really meant something. It could really have an effect. And like these curses are like, you could say, they stayed. They remain until now. Whatever curses were spoken there, there's a whole list. And Prabhupada goes into it. How it's still going on. It's observable, how the consequences of this curses are visible, how the brahmanas, become corrupted, it's unfortunate, but many priests, make their temples to a business, and they become corrupted. This is part of this course also, So if you just make it, if your motivation, for worship is not really pure, then you can be also, degraded very deeply. Many priests, especially if you go to Jagannath Puri, there's all this. You go to any temple, and they were really like, they try to somehow, they, like you sit down, like repeat after me, Gotra, no Gotra, Kachita Gotra, name, this, and if you say 2-3 words with them, they'll just push you until you say all the words, and then they make a puja, and then you have to pay. So you can see, that some of these brahmanas, they're obviously, affected by this curse that happened back long time ago. The wrong motivation is there, only ritualistic, and they become pitiable. Basically, they're not really brahmanas in the sense as we heard in the in the Bhagavad Gita. They become an annoyance. Instead of serving society, they become basically parasites, of society. That's Kali Yuga. In the Kali Yuga, this, you could say, the effects of this course become even more, obvious and visible and rampant. And yes, there's of course a very famous Hindi saying. How does it go? Mare Krishna Rakeke, Rake Krishna Mareke. So this is the saying Prabhupada is saying here. So if Krishna wants to kill somebody, nobody can protect him. If somebody wants to be protected by Krishna, nobody can harm him or kill him. So Srila Prabhupada is referring to this this saying here in English, and he gives the example of Ravana. Ravana was actually a great devotee of Lord Shiva, very great devotee. There's the Shiva Tandava Stotram. Ravana composed it. Very, very beautiful Sanskrit prayers. It's still very popular in India, and very rhythmic, and it's really cool actually to hear Ravana's prayers to Lord Shiva. He was a great devotee, very great bhakta, basically. But at the same time, he had very evil traits. Very evil traits. He actually one interesting, like you could say, detail that sometimes people don't know is that when Ravana kidnapped Sita, he wanted to take her for himself, of course. And the reason why he didn't enforce himself on Sita was because he was cursed before already. So Ravana had already in the past, transgressed and basically raped. I forgot whom exactly. Ramba. No? So he was cursed that if he would ever dare to do that again, he would die. He would die. So he couldn't. He was trying to persuade Sita, with wealth, with all kinds of things, hopeless, but he was trying, So there was Ravana, at the same time. And of course Ravana was so, and that happens regularly, with the followers of Lord Shiva. There's a few stories, but Ravana also at one point, he tried to lift Kailash, very famous depiction, Many temples have this depiction, of Ravana, with all of Kailash, Sita, not Sita, Parvati and Shiva sitting on top of Kailash, and he's trying to lift. So he was actually trying to kind of be naughty against his master, and then he couldn't do it, and then he realized, and so he became humble again, started praying again. But so even he was considered to be a great devotee. Devotion to Lord Shiva is always different to devotion to Lord Krishna. The traits are very clear. Gaur Keshava Prabhu gave once a very detailed lecture about this, because in modern day South India, like in modern day, but in Kali Yuga, maybe like a few hundred years ago, there was a strong rivalry actually between Shaivites and Vaishnavas, due to the influence of Kali Yuga. And it's basically Gaur Keshava Prabhu was explaining how the Shaivites tried to prove and copy that everything that the followers of Vishnu did or have done, or Vishnu did himself, Shaivites did much better. You know? So they invented, all kind of, new, stories, Puranas, in more or less recent times, maybe like, I think it was time of the Pallavas or the Cholas, I'm not sure, especially in Tamil Nadu. There's, for example, there's of course the story of Nrsingadev here, and then they developed the story of a form of Shiva, who is, basically like a half man, half lion, but it's more like a lion, like body with a human body on top and a lion head, and he's fighting against Nrsingadev, and he's defeating Nrsingadev. Like that, So they tried to, and I forgot the name of this deity, but it's, in some parts of India you can see that, in South India especially. And the Rasa dance also, they developed some version, so everything, and Gaura Prabhu knew all the details. I can do the same, but he was showing how it's an obvious copycat. It's like very clear when there's the original and there's a copycat, you recognize the original in the copycat, and therefore you know it's a copycat. Because you can see what's original in the copycat, and you can see what came later. So. Like that. So the Shivas, Shaivites and Vaishnavas, there is you could say, some form of competition there, or you could say antagonism there, but only if we have a dualistic perspective, actually, because of this history, the Sri Vaishnavas, they are very conservative against Shaivaism. They're very like Sri Vaishnavas in South India. They really avoid Shiva, Shaivas, anything related to that. But in our tradition, when we read this story here, Shiva is the good. We actually are, considering Daksha, who technically was a devotee of Vishnu, actually. But he was proud. He made a mistake, against a great Vaishnava, and. So you could say when we read the Bhagavatam in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, we have a more, you could say maybe inclusive perspective. We see Shiva for who he really is. In the Sri Vaishnava tradition, as far as I understand, they even depict or consider Shiva to be a Jiva Tattva. They don't give him the position of Shiva Tattva. They say he's Jiva Tattva, and Shiva also has to gain mukti, to gain. To gain the perfection, lotus feet of Vishnu. And that is explained in the Bhagavatam that the Rudras are actually in that category. The Rudras, but Shiva himself, Mahadeva, he's his own tattva, Shiva tattva, and he's actually basically Vishnu, only in direct touch, married to material energy, Parvati, and in many Leelas, of course, Lord Shiva appears directly, even in Krishna Leela directly. In Vrindavan, we consider that if you really want to enter Vrindavan, first you should take shelter of Gopeshwara Mahadev. He will give entrance into Vrindavan. And Shiva takes the form of a gopi. He takes bath in a lake and comes out as a gopi, and then can take part in Krishna's Leela. And another detail that is mentioned is that all the thorny shrubs, cactuses and plants in Vrindavan, they're considered to be forms of Lord Shiva, who are protecting the holy Dham. So, yeah, for us Lord Shiva is Vaishnavadam Yatha Shambhu, he's the greatest of Vaishnavas. So we don't see real duality. We look more at this whole situation. How easily Vaishnava Aparad can occur, and what devastating effects it can have. So I think this is the main lesson. And of course the Brahmanas, they have in their own right, they are following, always Lord Vishnu, performing sacrifices. But their mistake is, if they become too proud, they might discount, or disrespect Lord Shiva, big mistake, And the followers of Lord Shiva, there, of course, many of them are in a mode of good ignorance, and Shiva is so generous that he's giving them shelter. But if they, enraged, they can also commit all kinds of offenses, against the brahmanas, and also, of course, it will have consequences for them. Yes. So I think that's all I want to say today. Maybe there are some other points, questions, something you would like to add. Anybody? Otherwise, we stop here and the snow is not stopping. Grantaraj Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai, Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai. Feeling better already? I have some good herbs. Yeah. That is native food. Because in the summer I miss to harvest enough, but my mother harvested something. And it's white flower grows in the